Hi, my name's Abby,
And I'm Charlie.
and we're going to be discussing what we think was the most important theme of The Other Wes Moore. So I thought that it was the role of mentors.
And I agree with that statement.
So the first thing that I noticed in the book was on the 6th page, well, it's like in between the 6th and 7th page, when the author Wes's father is deciding his middle name, he decides the name, I think it's pronounced Watende. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Close enough.
But it means revenge will not be sought. And then at the end of the book, on page 121, this comes back into play, and it says, I thought about my father and the name he chose for me, which again means revenge will not be sought. And it kind of like shows how like his father was like a mentor to him, and he remembered back to something that his dad gave him when he was younger and decided not to fight back, so it like influenced his decisions or his actions or whatever.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think throughout the book, he brings up just little things about his dad, because even though he wasn't around for most of his life, he constantly is thinking back to that one memory he has where his dad comforts him. And it just shows that even though someone like wasn't around and actually with him throughout his whole life, he was able to influence him in such a way that literally probably is one of the main reasons that the author ends up so successful, just having that positive thought in his head and knowing that there are other people out there who can like succeed, even though maybe his dad didn't really go as far as like the author may have in like a society point of view, but like in his eyes his dad was like so important to him.
Yes, and I agree with that. Although the author's father wasn't like with him his whole life, this is like similar to Wes because his dad also wasn't with him, but the way their fathers left them had a huge impact on them, because the author Wes's father, it wasn't his choice, and he was like a good man. He was always there for him, and like the memories he has of him are so positive, so that like gives him a positive perspective. Whereas Wes's father, it wasn't a good relationship, and it kind of like sets him back early on in life.
Yeah, I agree with that, because it says even in the book how he sees his dad a couple times and his dad doesn't even, for Wes at least, his dad doesn't even know who he is, and he's like, oh, who are you? And it just kind of like puts a different vibe on like his whole like idea of being a mentor to other people, because like when he finds out that his girlfriend is pregnant at such a young age, Wes literally says, he's like, I don't see the point of me being in the child's life. He's like, I never had a father figure, why should this child either?
Along with that, when he finds out she's pregnant, he, where is it? On page 99, the first thing he does is asks, how could Alicia get herself pregnant, and like immediately blames her. And I feel like that kind of shows like how he was raised, because the author Wes on page 10, like at the beginning of the story, when he hits his little sister, his mom like immediately like punishes him, and it like shows how like he was taught right from wrong at a young age, and like the other Wes was like, he was never taught this from the young age, so he tends to just like blame other people or like not take responsibility for his actions and like try and change what he does wrong.
Yeah, from a young age too, Wes, it's like you can tell that his mom, she cares about what he does and wants to show him right from wrong, but she doesn't put enough like action into that. Like she might say like, oh, you shouldn't do that, Wes, but she never actually gives like a punishment or like really shows that what he's doing is wrong. So in his like it creates like a message in his head like, oh, like yeah, that might be wrong, but it doesn't mean I can't do it. Especially having his brother Tony growing up and doing literally the opposite, and then with Tony also telling him like, oh, don't be like me, but then doing all that bad stuff. It just shows that like you really just follow people's actions more than their words a lot of the time, even if they're contradicting each other.
I agree with that. I also feel that. Sorry, I'm trying to find. Okay, so like going along with that, on page 72 it says like Wes wanted to be just like Tony. Tony wanted Wes to be nothing like him. So that kind of shows like the do as I say, not as I do type of thing. And I feel like it's hard for Wes because he wants to like Tony is one of his only like positive mentors, even if he's not necessarily a positive person. That is who he has to look up to. So he wants to do everything like him, and he wants to be just like his brother, even if that isn't the best way to go.
Yeah, in Wes's eyes, Tony is like the positive person, and just being an older brother, I feel like younger siblings always look up to their older siblings, no matter how they act. And not saying that Tony is the reason for the way Wes ended up, but he definitely had a huge influence on it, because throughout the book, Wes constantly, whenever he's doing anything, he thinks back to when Tony told him to send a message, and I feel like it fuels like almost like a fire in Wes and causes him constant.
What class are ladies in?
English.
Okay.
We're doing a discussion.
Yeah.
She know that you guys
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. As I was saying, like, he constantly comes back to what Tony said of send a message, and it just really turns, like, it's really one of those factors that change, like, between the author and Wes, how just the author would constantly be like, if he started doing something, he was like, okay, like, I shouldn't do that, that will have a negative effect, but then Wes had that thought of, oh, my brother said send a message, so that's what I should do. And it just like affects him.
I know one day in class we talked about how Wes gets into drug dealing and like whose fault or like who is to blame for that. Although I think it's like Wes's fault, I also feel like, or Tony's fault, I also feel like that's on Wes. Like he was taught from a young age, like he wasn't taught right from wrong from a young age, so it's hard for him, but it's also on him, and he like needs to take more responsibility for his actions, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that obviously everyone is in charge of deciding their own fate and making their own decisions, but I think Wes, he had in his head that his life was already laid out for him and he didn't really have a choice. And like I feel like that mindset was part of the reason that he did follow like in Tony's footsteps and didn't really like try to be a better person, because he felt like, oh, this is already planned out for me, I already know how this is gonna end up. And it's just, I don't know.
Another time it's shown when like the author is like separated from Wes is when he gets caught like marking or like vandalizing. On page 83 it says, while I loudly attempted to overrule him by apologizing profusely. So like as soon as he gets caught, he like immediately is like, I'm so sorry, whereas Wes would be like, what did I do? Like I didn't even do anything wrong. Like and just immediately like blame others, like I said before. But then I noticed it says the next page, it says, I swear I would never get caught in a situation like that again. But a week later, King Cupid was on the loose again. So King Cupid was like the tagging name or whatever.
Right.
So like why do you think he does this, or like what causes this action? Because we've noticed like an opposite trend.
Right. I feel like part of that, I mean, obviously it's his own decisions and stuff, but I feel like part of that is where he was like growing up in the situation he was in, because like as you can see, like the first time he was caught vandalizing, he wouldn't have done that unless his friend showed up and was like, hey, we should do this, like it will be fun, and he just kind of like molded into the situation he was part of. And I feel like that, obviously we don't know, but that probably would happen again. And it is really hard when people around you and the people you've grown up with and the only people you know are all acting one way.
Yeah.
It's very hard to go against what everyone's doing, even if you know in your head that, oh, this isn't right and I don't want to get caught again. It's kind of that peer pressure of just being like, maybe if they're doing it, I guess I can do it one more time, you know. And you can see that with Wes too, how he more instigated the bad things, but at the same point, like, he followed what other kids around his block and like his age were doing.
The author was?
Both.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's one point where he's talking about, like, because he goes to a predominantly white school, the author Wes does, and he can't relate to the kids, so he kind of lives, like, a double standard life, and he has to, like, completely change. And then at one point it says, like, hip-hop also gave the kids in my school a point of entry into my life, showing, like, how he couldn't normally relate to them, but it kind of, like, gave them a way to, like, see his life. So I feel like he really does struggle with, like, trying to fit in.
An identity.
And, yeah, with his identity. And I feel like having a strong mentor or, like, someone to look up to, even if they aren't in your life that long, like the author's dad was, is so important, because then it's, like, it helps you to find who you are. Whereas if you don't have that, it makes you, like, feel more lost and, like, confused. Like, what do I do? Like, you don't know how to make decisions for yourself.
Right. Yeah. And I feel like once the author went to military school and wasn't stuck in this almost like stuck in between two different lives and two different situations, it really helped him like realize which direction he wanted to go. And I know he states once that he felt like when he was in military school, it was like he was stuck in a bubble and he felt like he was disconnected from his like world outside, but then in the next breath he was thankful for that because he didn't have to worry about all the bad things going on, and he was just able to focus on what he can do to help make his life better. And I feel like that was a huge role of mentors too, having all of the sergeants and I don't really know the actual words, lieutenants to look out for. And especially when he sees the one other black like leader in that situation, I feel like it's like a turning point for him where he's like, I can really do this and I can follow through, and it just gives him like someone to look up to.
Because I feel like you can relate more on like a deeper level if people are similar to you, either like in their past life or just like in general if they're similar to you.
Yeah.
I also feel like that kind of reminds me, like how you said he felt like he was trapped in a bubble, and then like when he went there it was kind of like at first like not weird per se, but like trapping, but then at the same time he felt more free in the end. I feel like that's kind of like social media today, because like everybody's so caught up in like constantly like posting and keeping up with everything that it's like you don't realize it, but it's like you're trapped in a bubble, but then like once you like get rid of it you feel more trapped at first, but then it's like, oh wait, like I don't need this. So I feel like that is also seen in the book, how at the beginning when he's first at military school he tries to run away and gets away from it, but then as you can see later throughout the story when he's running back into the finding like safety in the school with his other friend, I just feel like that kind of shows what you just said. And like at first you might feel like this is the not safe place, but then as you get used to it and realize how much better it is, like he ran back for safety and it was his safe place. Going back to what we said earlier about how like there's a struggle for fitting in and finding your identity, I feel like that's also part of the reason why Wes gets into drug dealing, is because on page 111 it says, this is the crew, and for many members it was the only support system they had. So it's kind of like showing how many people that were in the drug dealing, like the gangs and like just anything relating to that, they didn't have that many mentors or like in general like family they were close with, or like a good like home situation. So I feel like they coped by like turning to that, because they could make a family out of that, and they became so close with like everything they had to experience and go through together. So I feel like that was like another reason he joined.
Yeah, the drug, like, that was his family. And especially at that point, like, Tony was off doing his own drug, like, corporation over in the other side of town. And his mom was just so busy doing, like, working and stuff. He really was just alone. And I feel like that's how a lot of those boys felt, that they were alone. And then when they joined, like, this drug family, not only were they making a ton more money to have, like, to show for that, but they also, like, felt connected and finally, like, for a lot of them, probably the first time in their life, felt like they meant something to someone and, like, as a group. And I feel like even though they were peers, a lot of them, it was, like, took over with the role of mentors again because they looked up to, like, the other members of their crew.
And shoot, what was I gonna say? Along with the how his mom flushed his drugs down the toilet and his first reaction was like he got mad because at first he wanted to like try and cover it up, but then when he saw that like the money was wasted and it was gone, he immediately just got mad and like wanted to run away and stuff. I feel like that also could kind of symbolize like him losing part of his crew because he immediately was like, they're all gonna be so mad at me, like I need to pay them back, I need to like get this money back, because he was scared that they would also like turn on him or like maybe not even turn on him, be like upset with him, and he didn't want that because they were like his family.
Right. Yeah, and right around that time, like on page 100, Wes states that he felt like he had reached the point of no return. And I feel like he was like referring to like the drug like situation and just being so deep in it that you can't get away from that. And I feel like that when his mom did that, it was part of that like pushing him in deeper. And yes, she was trying to help and thinking that this would help, but it really just like fueled him to be like, I need to do more. I have to find a new place to hide this. I'm gonna make this a bigger corporation. Like I'm gonna keep going to be like so powerful. And I don't know, I feel like a lot of them are fueled by power, and they feel like the more they can do this, the more power they get. And the author shows that too, for as he gets like placed higher and higher in like the military school and like stuff like that, you just feel more powerful. And I feel like that's a huge theme that everyone really faces. We don't necessarily always realize it, but we always want to feel like we have power and like almost like authority so other people can respect us.
I feel like that's kind of similar to like captains in a sport, where like sometimes people take too much advantage of their power, which can be a bad thing, but I also feel like it gives people like a different type of confidence that sometimes you don't even realize you have. So I feel like it can go both ways.
Yeah.
Along with like the role of mentors, I feel like what other like so there's a quote that says we'll do what others expect of us, and I feel like this is like a really true statement. So like if your mentors like expect you to succeed, or like they constantly say like, no, you're gonna do good on that test, you're gonna go far in life, it's much more like uplifting and like you're gonna do better, rather than if the people around you are constantly bringing you down and saying like, you can't do this, you can't, like you're never gonna make it. And I feel like for the author there was more encouragement and like his mom putting him in military school and showing how much she cares.
All the sacrifice,
And like his grandparents sacrificing, like putting their house back up for mortgage and everything. Like when he realized that, he realized how much they cared, and it showed him like, no, like I've got this, like I have a support system, like this is what I need to do.
Right. I agree with that. And we can't judge like any of the adults in their situations, because obviously like I have no idea what they're going through. But that's also seen when Wes's mom, like she loses her grant and isn't able to like continue college. Obviously like Wes was so young, but that does have an effect on him, just to see that like, oh, like it's all against us, and like my mom couldn't finish this, I probably wouldn't be able to do that stuff too. Versus like the author, his mom continued to keep working. She worked like 4 jobs, and he had like grandparents to look up to, and all these people rooting for him, versus Wes really had his mom like half the time rooting for him, and Tony kind of, but not really paying attention. He just didn't have as much support.
And I don't feel like it's necessarily Tony's fault, because Tony also grew up in the same environment, and he didn't even have someone like himself to look up to, because Tony was the oldest.
Right.
So he had just his parents. And so it shouldn't be on Tony to raise Wes, but it also is hard because he's the older brother, and like, as you said, siblings look up to their older siblings, so it is partially on him, but he doesn't know what he's doing either.
Right. That's the thing. I feel like, obviously Tony pretty much is given all this responsibility without actually knowing it, and obviously he's still a kid. It's not his job to be able to understand that, or really, and it really shouldn't be put on him anyway. But I feel like Wes almost just like puts it on himself, was like, oh, my brother did this, I guess that's how I'll end up too, even though Tony's constantly trying to like doing more than he even should, and telling Wes like, don't be like me, like please don't. It's still just, Wes almost gave up at such a young age and just fell into this like, oh, it's already chosen for me, I'm gonna follow what everyone else already, like the negative side of what everyone would expect.
Like the expectations thing, kind of going back to that. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Goodbye.
Thank you.